Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 9 of the WeCOACH podcast on Wisp Sports.
It's my dream, a life of ease. That's just the way I roll. Oh, when the going gets tough, I just get most up. Oh, 'cause everything is not enough.
Every 2 weeks, we sit down with some of the best and brightest women coaches, leaders, and industry experts in the world of sports for fun and inspiring conversations. I'm your host, Megan Kahn, Executive Director of WeCOACH. This podcast is a co-production of WeCOACH and Wisp Sports. WeCOACH has become the premier nonprofit organization committed to recruiting, retaining, and advancing women in the world of sports at all levels. Through programming, resources, and an engaged community, we are changing the landscape for female coaches and the next generation of young women who dream of following in their footsteps. Today's guest is a real-life Wonder Woman, an attorney by day, a FIFA soccer ref, president-elect of the Women's Sports Museum in Sarasota, Florida, and most importantly, a mother to a beautiful 3-year-old toddler. Christina is one of the most passionate advocates for women in sports that I have ever met. I can't wait for y'all to be inspired by her story. Welcome, Christina. Thanks so much for being here on the WeCOACH podcast.
No, of course. Thanks for having me this morning.
So we're sitting here on a beautiful sunny winter day in Florida, about to inspire the world with your story. You ready?
Oh, gosh. Yes. I would say I think the weather itself would inspire many people that are up in the north at this moment.
I called you a real life Wonder Woman in my intro because you really do carry a badge. Just happens to be a refereeing badge. First things first, let's have your backstory. How did you become a FIFA soccer ref?
Yeah, so I've actually been officiating for about 21 years now. When I say that out loud, it's kind of it kind of shocks me, but I have been. And similar to kind of any other path for referees, there's a gradual build-up progression to it. And so I became a FIFA referee approximately 7 years ago. In 2013 was the first year I got put on the panel. But prior to that, it was a lot of games I did, obviously what people would expect a referee to do, kind of in your backyard, doing those youth games, seeing them on every Saturday and doing those tournaments. And then little from little, I kind of just kept that as my job while I was going through high school, and I was playing some college soccer and yelling at the referees, go figure, like the rest of us do. And the referee there was the boss of Florida for referees. And so they picked me up from there, and it's kind of been a really cool story on that point, and moving forward with respect to U.S. Soccer Federation recognizing me as a top official and working with me, and then finally appointing me when I met the age requirements and the game number counts when I was 25 to the panel.
When you were in, I believe it was high school, didn't your coach tell you could only yell at the referees if you knew the rules? And so that's what inspired you to learn the rules?
Yeah, that was, go figure, I was 10. I was 10 years old, and I was playing, and go figure, I was yelling at the refs, a bad habit that, especially in the sport of soccer that we do, which we're obviously trying to stamp out so that we can get more referees into the game. And thankfully, my coach was a referee too on the side, and, he said, if you're going to yell at the refs, you might as well learn the laws of the game and, sound intelligent at least while you're yelling at them. So my options were either to continue to yell, meaning I had to take the referee course, or I had to stop yelling and just play the game. So, there's a little bit in me that wanted to keep yelling. So I took the course, and it gave me that real appreciation and understanding for the laws of the game, and to realize that I didn't really know exactly what I was talking about, even though I thought I did playing the game. So, that was the start. That was the start of it all. I hit that on the head. Sorry, it's kind of always a funny story, but that's the start of me at 10 years old to kind of jump into this, and who knew that was going to be a passion that really, really kind of directed my life in the sense of professional as well as personal.
So did you realize at that time that there weren't many women officials?
No, and I think there was a lot of naiveness for myself. Thankfully, and I'm very thankful, I grew up, was actually born and raised in the San Diego, California area. And I had always been raised by parents and a supportive family. who would always inform me and tell me, I could do anything and be anything I ever want to be. We're in America. I'm first generation. So my dad's from Guatemala, my mom's from Honduras. And so I was actually born and raised here. And they were very supportive and they really believed in the American dream and always told me I could do anything and be anything I wanted to be. And so for me, that was just the way of life. So I was very naive to any kind of gender equity concerns or issues when I was younger. Having started at 10, right? It just, you got put on the smaller games, the younger games earlier, just because you didn't have the skill requisite, plus you were half the size of everybody. But it was one thing I wasn't very conscious of until, honestly, I started probably when I was starting at higher levels, did I realize, looking around, that there were really not that many female referees. It was kind of an ongoing joke that there was more male than female referees, but I guess I wasn't very conscious about it until I started moving to the higher levels and realizing that, women referees just started falling off when it came from, backyard recreational. There was many, and then the higher up you go, you just all of a sudden, and what I kind of define as you became a unicorn. There wasn't many of us out there at the higher levels. So yeah, it took a while for me to recognize that. But
how many other American women are FIFA certified?
So here in the United States, we have, oh gosh, I got to get these numbers correct, but I think we have over 85 or 90,000 certified referees in general. Of that, I know that there is 32,000 U.S. Or women registered as soccer officials. And of that, there is only 3 women who are, and so we get very specific when we get to the FIFA level. You're either a center referee or the head referee, or you're an assistant referee, the ones that run on the line. And from the head referee, there are only 3, me being one of them in the United States. And on the line, there are a total of 6 assistant referees.
So impressive. That is so impressive.
Some of us say we lasted the longest. So we lasted the longest amongst all the pains and the growing pains, but we're there, and it was actually really nice. We just had our professional referee organization camp, the organization that governs the professional side of soccer here in the United States, which is MLS, NWSL, and some second divisions. And it was really, really good. It kind of turns into kind of a sisterhood because we've all gone through very similar or through same, or are able to kind of empathize with each other on coming up and circumstances, not just in the refereeing side of it, but in how we balance this with essentially how we balance our personal and our actually businesses on the side as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to get to more of that. So you referenced being younger and not necessarily recognizing gender as a barrier to your progression as a referee. But now do you look at yourself as a trailblazer and inspire an entire future generation of women to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I to be honest, I kind of struggled with that identity for a while, which is ironic because now I'm helping, and we could probably discuss this later, the Women's Sports Museum. But it was something I struggled with, right? You never want to be recognized or you don't ever feel like you want to be recognized as a trailblazer or one kind of leading the charge, or being another representative in that capacity, because you just don't want it to be based upon your gender. You don't want to say I'm a female referee. You just want to be seen as the rest of your colleagues and not stand out based on gender alone. But probably, at the end of 2016, probably that's really where I kind of embraced and understood more so what this platform and role can do for those who are pursuing refereeing in other areas, or even coming up, is that sometimes seeing is believing. Growing up, I was told all the time, you could be whoever you want to be. You can do anything you want to do. But it wasn't until the end of 2016 when, regardless of any political affiliation, you hear Hillary continue to comment in her recession, and essentially just reminding young girls that they can be the president if they ever want to be. And that kind of shook me for a bit, because usually when someone loses, they don't sit there and spend their entire speech trying to remind the young boys they can be the president. That's already understood. And so I was under this belief that, as a female, you can always be whatever it is you want to be. And that's when I really, really realized that sometimes seeing is believing, grabbing hold of that, and showing and demonstrating. And you can tell people as much as you want, but until they actually see it, do some people actually believe it? So kind of to your point about the trailblazer component of it, I mean, there's those before me who led as well. And sometimes we don't recognize those before us because we just didn't recognize or celebrate that path. So I'm now holding it by the horns. I'm now recognizing what it is. And, I've taken steps in the past year or 2 years to essentially, use this platform to remind those, coming up swiftly on my heels and those prior to that, you can be a referee at the highest levels and referee men's professional soccer. That is something that can happen. So am now stepping into that role that seeing is believing and willing to embrace that for, the future.
Well, thank you for embracing that, because I think it's critically important to our young women and young women who we hope would stay in the game, whether that's as a coach or as a referee or even as a parent of a son or daughter, than a strong parent on the sideline behaving how we would want them to behave. We should also mention for our listeners, your husband is a FIFA ref. So what is that like at home?
Oh yeah, it's for a time being. I think now there's a second couple. Funny enough, they're actually friends of ours from New Zealand, but we're the only married FIFA couple in the world, and it was kind of an ongoing joke. But and we always joke. We said I was on the panel for 4 years more before he joined the panel. But we actually don't talk about soccer very often at the house, or football for the rest of the world. At the house very much, and people are surprised by that. And I mean, he's done a very good job, especially since I kind of shot up through the ranks really quickly. It kind of keeping me counterbalanced to the realities of our, the sports world, right? Where, it gets really exciting. You move up the ranks really quickly. And then some seasons, like players and coaches, you can go be an off season or a bad season or just you kind of plateau in development. And he's been really good at, keeping my head counterbalanced. So yeah, it's great because we're able to bounce ideas, and we basically are, the same people. We know the same people, the same experiences, the same inside jokes at the end of the day. Like, you don't have to explain scenarios, but for the most part, we actually don't talk about soccer. We talk about everything else in our lives.
Do you guys train together?
We do not. It's really frustrating to train with him because he's really, really fast. I joke with him. He's like Benjamin Button. The older he gets, the more fit he's been getting. I thought we were supposed to all age together, and get slower together, but he seems to keep getting faster. So essentially what he's very good at, he's very explosive with speed and movement. So that's very effortless for him. And that's like one of my things that I focus on. So we have a little bit training regimen differently, but we do train. We each understand each other's training schedules. So for example, I get up at 4:30 to train between 5 and 7:30 in the morning. And he does his training in the evening. So we both understand each other's schedule in that regard, and also helps with balancing our 3-year-old that he stays in the morning with her, and in the evening I stay with her. So that's how we balance it.
That's great balance, and I think a great point for our listeners to hear. How do you work your not only extensive travel schedules, and then you're also a full-time attorney?
So it's I feel like the concept of work-life balance is a myth, right? Because if you always live in a work-life balance, it's this conceptual idea that everything is always in equilibrium, which if you seek for everything to be in equilibrium, you're only going to drive yourself crazy, because that's not the reality. Not everything will always be equally balanced. So it's more like counterbalancing. There's some times in some places in your life where, you'll be more in the extreme and others will be, out of balance. But the idea is never to stay too much into a counterbalance position and to always kind of come back either to center or to another position. And so to kind of balance, like you said, all of that with the counterbalancing aspect is I'm very big about systems and processes. So building a team to help support us. So everyone's like, well, how do you do everything? And it's like, you don't. If you ever believe that somebody does something only all by themselves and is successful at it, then you've read into a myth, or you're deceiving yourself, because at the end of the day, everyone always has some type of support system with them. For me, I was very conscious of that, and I kind of basically drew out the buckets of what are areas that I consider priorities in my life that I'd like to keep. And if so, how do I create an atmosphere or an environment that allows me to be successful in those different areas? Obviously, one of them, and it's something we talked about prior to, is having a child, right? Obviously, their needs come before ours, and, any kind of balances and demands. But in order to do so, it's like, okay, how do we set up a system where, if we need to travel, we have someone we can rely on. Thankfully, my parents, where maybe it's a cultural thing too. If I didn't let my mom take care of my daughter, we're Hispanic, she would kill me. So she actually quit her job and moved up, and my dad moved up with her, and they help us raise our little one. So when we travel quite a bit, it's that idea of a team. So it takes a village to raise your 3-year-old. So that's how we deal with Quinn, which is amazing. And the legal world, it took going to different firms to necessarily find what was the right cultural fit, and what kind of firm would understand essentially that I don't just referee in the backyards on a Saturday morning, but I travel internationally and professionally, and I may be gone for some time period. So thankfully, the team here at Mahler, Christopher and Toll were amazing in understanding exactly what I was pursuing, and giving me the ability to continuously practice the law while I pursue this other passion of mine, and setting up a team for me, and remote capability is just amazing, and the support for it. They actually then themselves, it was Megan will laugh, but I actually went into an interview with them, and I kept telling them I was not the best employee. They don't want to hire me. Which is a weird thing to go into an interview, is to continuously tell the potential employer you don't want to hire yourself, because I was just different. I'm very different than the traditional lawyer, very different than one, who's going to be here from, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single night, and bill those high billable hours in that regard. So it was interesting that when they drafted an employment agreement, they also included specifically in my employment agreement that I'm giving considerable flexibility for my soccer officiating. So it's really finding that other team and that atmosphere and the environment that really supports what you have considered priority in your life. And so those are two of probably the biggest areas in my life outside of refereeing that, I've had to build that team in order to pursue some of these goals that I'd like to pursue, and putting into perspective, like not many people get the opportunity to kind of be in the position that I am. So I always have to remind myself that, I can't take it for granted. And, you sometimes just got to go for it, even if it's against tradition or if it's against what, other people define as success. I, restate and say, what does success look like for me, and how do I define it? And then that's how I go about it.
I appreciate your comments on that. You hit so many buzzwords in your reply there that I think so many of us are constantly chasing, or the work-life balance and fit and culture and all of these concepts that seem to be this elusive thing that in the coaching profession or even in the corporate world or mothers, we're all searching for those things that make us happy and trying to find time and trying to really balance out those priorities. So I appreciate your comments on that.
Yeah, no problem. And I think one thing I've accepted is that not everything will be done in one day. So, right, once you accept that fact, it's more within the nature of, women in general, is that we all pursue perfection at all times, right? And that's a great trait to have. But once you also accept the fact that not everything is going to be done perfectly in one day, it's a little easier to breathe. It's a lot easier to breathe.
So I want to know, what's more stressful, an international game or a high stakes court case?
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's an international game. You have a split of a second to take a look at a play, make a decision in front of thousands in the crowd and millions on TV. That's a lot more stressful. And it's funny that you raised that, because I was in a contentious deposition the other day, and the court reporter and the client, it was just very contentious. And I don't know why sometimes they get like that, but they do. And they said, yeah, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, this is easy. I could take a 5-minute break, right? I was able to look at, the court reporter, say, we're taking a 5-minute break. Let's reset and let's come back, right? Can you imagine if I could do that in a game? Hey, everyone, let's take a quick break. Let me go get some electrolytes in me. Let me take a look at video review and then come back with a decision. So I would definitely defer to the international game. And thankfully, we're now getting into video review. But even then, I do video review for MLS, and the pressure to do video review is still, I would say a game more than high stake litigation, which some people would kind of jaw at. But at that point, you have opportunities to, revise strategy, come back. There's not many things you can't recover from in a litigation component, as opposed to a game. You got to split a second. You just got to be confident with your training at that point.
Right. And so then your answer is surprising me here because I have heard you're a bit lighthearted on the field. I could rest assured you're probably not that way in the courtroom. So how do you compare those two personas?
Well, it's funny because actually people tell me, they're like, I'm surprised you're an attorney. I'm like, really? Okay, is that a compliment? Is that not? And they go, well, no, you're just not typical attorney in the sense that you kind of, speak down or, hold these really hard positions. And at the end of the day, right, we say we're supposed to zealously represent our client. And I think some people, take that into overly take that word zealously into a position where you get hard and fast in a position that, even though it's not supported by the facts or is practically correct, people take that position and it just becomes juxtaposed to the reality of the world. So I'm actually lighthearted, kind of in both contexts. Obviously, I do zealously represent my client, and being that, right, if this is the position and this is a correct position and it's supported by fact and by reason and by applicable practication, like, how do we not go down that route? So, right, those are the things that are easily able to get passionate about. Same thing kind of on the field, right? At the end of the day, I'm like, it's ironic. I'm in these positions where there's lots of, sometimes stress or controversy or just negativity, and I'm really not a negative person at all. So I was like, why can't we just all get along? Dissect, the gray and the black and the white, and then make decisions in the gray, right? Because there's usually less that we agree on than more than we agree on the field as well as in the courtroom. So I take that approach more to everything. I'm able to, thankfully, and like I said, the refereeing thing has really set my stage for my legal career. I'm able to not find myself blindfolded or biased. I'm able to look at things from a very, very neutral perspective. And then really explain sometimes to the client, like, okay, here's our different positions, here's the gray area. And then, yes, of course I can, we can advocate in that direction, and I can be passionate about that. I can support that position. And so that's kind of where I come from, is the ability to look at things very neutral, and then be passionate in that regard. But yeah, I am at the most part, sometimes it works out really good when you keep going against the same opposing counsel and they figure out you're not going to, put your head in the sand and, take these crazy positions and be unreasonable. And it actually makes things a lot more efficient for clients. People don't realize that is the more, opposing counsel can actually have conversations together, and actually really crystallize the issues that are at dispute. The easier and more cost effective it is for the client. But sometimes it takes a while to convince opposing counsel of that as well, too.
I'm going to transition here to another one of the hats you wear. We both live in Florida and very geographically close to each other. And we're fortunate to live in an area that supports women who work in sports, including the WISE Tampa Bay chapter. So we cross paths pretty often. One of the things near and dear to your heart is the Women's Sports Museum. Share with our listeners about the museum.
Yeah, so the Women's Sports Museum is the one and only museum in the entire world dedicated solely to women in sports. I'm going to repeat that again. The one and only museum in the entire world dedicated solely to women in sports. That position also caught me by surprise when I first heard about them. For twofold. One, because they were trying to build it in my backyard, which obviously makes it very convenient for me for something I'm already passionate about. And that I want to jump on board. But two, I needed to kind of fact check that. And thankfully, I have some friends at Clemson who work in the sports history department whose sole job is to really do sports museum histories. And they actually fact checked that for me and said, yeah, that is correct. Surprisingly, there's not a museum. And if there is, I'd love to know about it. But there's not a museum in the world that's dedicated solely to women in sports. Usually museums or sports museums or Hall of Fames usually have a subsection dedicated to women, right? And it's usually sometimes more sports specific. So, right, if we think of University of Tennessee and the basketball program, right, they have a museum, but it's just women's basketball there. As opposed to this museum, that it's in its infancy. It's in its third year of really getting awareness, recognition, figuring out the temporary space as well as the, final building space. It is looking to do just that. It's looking to memorialize, highlight, and recognize the past, the present, and inspire the future. So the mission of the Women's Sports Museum is to inspire girls through the power of sports. And that's exactly kind of back to that point of, recognizing trailblazers is people don't really believe until they see. And even if they don't believe until they see, they don't know until they see. Like, I don't know this, right? We stand on, shoulders of giants, and I personally don't know whose shoulders I stand on. I know I stand on some, but I don't know who they are. And so what was probably considered back in the day social disruptors, right, are women athletes and coaches. And even if you think of the Boston Marathon, right, and the running in there underneath a pseudo name, right, that was a social disruptor back in the day. It's not a social disruptor, right? It's those standing up for what is right and being brave at a time period where it wasn't condoned. And so that's exactly what the Women's Sports Museum is looking to do. It's looking to memorialize and highlight. And they just finished one of their galas in October and are looking to host theirs on November 16th. But their annual gala does just that, where its focus is on recognizing women in sport who are trailblazing. So I could say one, for example, Lauren Holtkamp, who is the only female NBA referee right now. She was recognized as a trailblazer, and she's the third female to ever have had a full-time contract with the NBA as a referee. So it's individuals like that who are being recognized that we now are shedding light and able to see as who's doing what. And, really, even though the mission statement is to inspire girls through the power of sports, it really is to inspire everyone through the power of sports, right? So for example, an idea of the museum, which is going to be a living, breathing museum, not a Hall of Fame that's merely an artifact, but an interactive kind of museum. You go in, right, and you try to, hit a Jenny Finch fastball. It gives people an appreciation of how fast Jenny Finch can throw that ball. So it does this twofold thing of recognizing, women in sport, but also recognizing and appreciating talents and abilities and achievements by removing the female gender and just recognize them as athletes or coaches or women who've announced sports.
It's funny you mentioned Lauren Holtkamp. Donna Orender was also one of your honorees at last fall's gala, and both of them are involved in our National Girls and Women in Sports Day event coming up in Tampa on February 6th. So it's interesting how so many circles intersect in our area. I love that. You also have your own business for practicing law for women in sports and giving back called SPARQ Advocacy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so SPARQ Advocacy was started about a couple years ago. Like I said, I realigned a lot of my passions and my pursuits and figured out what I thought was a priority in my life. And taking a look at it, one of those things that I was very passionate about, it was women in sport and representing them in different areas when it comes to contract negotiation, just different areas regarding gender equity issues. And that was one thing that I realized there wasn't much representation out there. And if so, it wasn't being disclosed or advertised as such. And in this area of women in sports, I mean, women are entitled to equal pay, right? We think of the concept equal pay, equal play. And that's really where SPARQ came out from. SPARQ actually stands for Sports Advocacy, Rights, and Equality. And my goal is to, kind of with a lot of the stuff I do, especially in the litigation context, is providing people the right or access to justice in courts. And SPARQ just does that. It gives people a lot of women in sport the ability to come to the table, be reassured of their value and their worth, and, give them that vehicle to take those necessary steps.
Yeah, I appreciate all you do with giving back and how you advocate for women in sport, other women who maybe don't have resources or the means to get some of those things from an expert. And I appreciate all you do. How do you continue to grow as a leader?
I learn and I grow every day as a leader through others, really. Watching others, working with others. Right now I have this amazing ability to work with over like 250 women referees through an organization my business partner Liz Lowe and I created called the Deadlift Effect. And you think by giving back to others that, they're learning, and instead you learn so much more from them with respect to, what inspires others, how do we make steps forward. And so the leadership aspect is really coming from working and interacting with others, getting their feedback, seeing what's successful and what's not successful. And they really inspire me to make sure that every action, word, or step, or, different things that I do is truly in a bigger context than just myself. So definitely working with others gives me the light for leadership.
Is that what you say is what inspires you?
Yeah, yeah, I would say others inspire me, especially when I see them battling through obstacles, whether it's actual physical obstacles, whether it's mental obstacles, obstacles they can control or they can't control. Seeing people, focusing on themselves, not taking the victim mentality and saying, okay, maybe I can't control that aspect, but control what I can control. And moving forward in that direction and that mental athlete mindset we talk about, that's really, really inspirational and, really fuels those days where you sit there and you're like, oh, this is going to be a long day. Why am I doing this again? And then you look back and you see those people doing that. And that's definitely inspirational. And, it inspires me to continue to do what it is that I do.
For fun, we end every episode with quick hitters. I'm going to rapidly fire off some questions to you, and you come back with the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
If you could use one word to describe yourself, what would you say?
Compassionate.
Favorite thing to do on an off day, which for you is probably rare.
Yeah, that's a great question. Favorite thing to do on an off day. I would like to say read, but I don't read. So maybe I need to jump back on that.
Okay, that's hilarious. What do you love most about refereeing?
Giving back to the players.
Do you have any game day superstitions?
Game day superstitions. I have a ritual. So I think that might be the same. And the ritual is essentially arriving onto the field with the uniform. We arrive in suits, so it's kind of funny that we do that. But I call it putting on the war makeup, which is really just like crimping your eyelashes and putting mascara on, right, and getting that game face on. And then my biggest thing is before we leave the referee locker room, the entire crew puts the hand on the ball and we kind of say 1, 2, 3 team. So that's my ritual. Depending on how good that team is I know how, like our cheered, I know how good we're going to be that day.
So you got to have your power suit and you got to have team. I love it.
Yep.
What keeps you awake at night?
All the things I have left to do in life.
Your bucket list. Ooh, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, my bucket list. Yep.
If you could inspire all the young women listening, what tweet would you send to them?
Believe in your athlete mindset.
I love it. I appreciate it, Christina. This has been phenomenal. Thanks so much for being our guest and for your amazing advocacy and support for women in sports.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Thank you for all you guys do at WeCOACH.
Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Thanks for listening to today's show with Christina Unkel. We would love to hear from you. Follow us and share your comments on Twitter at WeCOACH and at Wisp Sports, or on Facebook at WeCOACH Sports and at Wisp Sports. The show notes for this episode can be found on our show page at wispsports.com. Make sure to subscribe to Wisp Sports on your podcast app to catch each new episode every other Thursday. Until next time, all sports, one voice, WeCOACH.
It's my